Back in my day, going into the job market, when I first started, you had to have a 2-1 from a prestigious university often. That has really kind of disappeared from the market. So university is becoming less relevant in terms of getting that degree.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Talent Download podcast. I'm Darren Lancaster. I'm the CEO from Amberjack. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to talk about a topic which is very relevant and certainly growing in the early careers marketplace, apprenticeships. We've got a great guest on today, which is we're going to talk about potentially kind of the differences in the rise of apprenticeships against graduates and really get into the detail. So without further ado, let's welcome Tom. So Tom is from BAE Systems, Tom Rogers. He's currently working within the apprenticeship program for them. Most importantly, to many of you will know my love for Crystal Palace Football Club. Tom is a fellow Crystal Palace supporter. We've had an amazing 6 months. We're going to do a great podcast today. We could talk about football in quite detail, I'm sure, but we will actually get on to apprenticeship. So welcome, Tom. I'll let you do a quick intro on yourself and your role in BAE.
Yeah, thanks for having me. We seem to congregate as Palace fans. We always seem to magnetise to each other.
Yeah.
But yes, so I would kind of best call myself as an apprenticeship champion. Aside from everything that I do, it's all about early careers. Having come from a background when apprenticeships weren't really advertised to me as a young person, going through university and not enjoying that experience, I'm kind of on a road now to increase that exposure, talk about the benefits, and make it more accessible to all, I suppose. So that's what I do as a job, but also outside of my job.
Yeah, good. And I think similar for me, although I kind of followed the graduate sort of program, when I was thinking about getting into work, I was a school leaver. Even at sort of 16, I was kind of applying for jobs, basically to try and get in the work. That didn't work out. I went into A-levels, just because I couldn't actually find the right role actually at the time that I could do. So I went into A-levels, did A-levels, then thought about actually, I wrote lots of different, I wanted to get into banking for some reason at the time. I wrote loads of letters to different banks and things like that to try and get in, couldn't get it in, and then kind of followed through to say, okay, I'm going to go to university and go through that program. And it's interesting, but the routes weren't necessarily great for me at that time, to do those things.
And there was an element of that where you do your GCSEs, you do your A-levels, you do your university. That was always the way.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was another way. And if you wanted to be a high achiever in life, you had to go to university. And as we'll probably talk in a moment, that's completely flipped now. Yeah. And I think since the kind of COVID pandemic and that cost of living crisis has really turned aspirations and expectations on its head.
Yeah. And I think recently some of the stats came out that apprenticeships, is actually kind of seeing a year-on-year growth of like around about 8%. That's obviously keeping, me busy, you busy, ultimately in our role. But let's get into the detail. What do you see as different, maybe from a BAE system, but also your knowledge across the kind of the industry and seeing things between a graduate scheme and an apprenticeship scheme?
Yeah, so I think the huge difference is, and I always say this to young people when I talk to them, is the type of learning. So we see a lot of universities and graduate courses all about that classroom theoretical learning. There are practical aspects, absolutely. I did kind of a physio alternative, so sports rehab is what I did. And that is very practical, but it's in a classroom, on your peers, as opposed to in real life. There were placements. Whereas an apprenticeship is all about that contextualised learning. So you go to school or university once a week, and you then take that into the workplace 4 days a week and turn that into real experience, real learning. So it's real contextualised learning and practical aspects. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I think that's a key thing, and I think there's certain individuals that are kind of coming out as school leavers that don't typically sort of fit within that graduate mould or that university mould into that workplace.
Well, I certainly would have been one of them, because I was at the age of 17, 18 really done with learning in a classroom aspect, teacher and student type of thing. I wanted, and I was very money orientated as well, I wanted to be out there doing things, but because I didn't know about apprenticeships, it wasn't an option. So absolutely, I think that could have been fantastic for me, going out into the world of work.
And do you think the drivers, we're sort of talking here, the drivers behind it or the growth within it is from candidate led? Is it from employers led? Is it government policy? that's kind of driving that? How do you see it?
I think it must be candidate-led at this point. I think UCAS said there was around 400,000 applicants or people going through UCAS that said they're interested in apprenticeships. The demand by employers was around 200,000 last year for starts. So there's a huge candidate demand for apprenticeships. But it comes from, as I said earlier, that cost of living crisis, that COVID pandemic where all of their kind of realities were shifted, I suppose. Money is harder to come by now for everyone, especially young people. And we have had a shift, as you might have seen already as well, in terms of back in my day going into the job market, when I first started, you had to have a 2-1 from a degree, university, from a prestigious university often. That has really kind of disappeared from the market. So university is becoming less relevant in terms of getting that degree, but you can get it from other places like apprenticeships. And in 2015-17, I think it was, degree apprenticeships were started, which means people are now able to get the same degree but in a different format, which is great.
Good. And do you hear of any kind of misconceptions from employers, or do you read about it, or do you see it in terms of doing apprenticeship schemes compared to a grad scheme? Do you see any of that?
Yeah, one of my key things really is to support apprenticeships, particularly SMEs. Getting into apprenticeships. One of the key misconceptions, and this is across the board, is apprenticeships used to be considered, I suppose, for the crafts, your hairdressers, and they were considered for roles that weren't going to get you far in life. That was always the way that we saw it as my schooling, which is absolutely untrue. And more recently, I've seen with degree apprenticeships, people not understanding, be it parents, students or employers, that it's the same degree. It's that same hat and gown that you'd get as an apprentice going through your degree as you would get it as a graduate. You go to the same ceremonies, but it's that misconception that they're somehow slightly different because one's an apprentice and one's a university.
Yeah. I've got that. I've got 5 kids. I've mentioned it many times before on the podcast. I've got 3 boys, 2 boys that one boy that's just come out of a grad scheme down at or a grad course down at Bournemouth University. One that's currently at Loughborough. He's in placement year at the moment. But then I've got my youngest son, and let's see what he becomes. But he's 12 years old. He's always wanted to be a pilot. I don't think it's ever going to change regarding that. And I don't think that's necessarily, going down a graduate scheme and things like that isn't the right scheme, for him to do, to succeed and be in that kind of career around it. And there's just many careers. So if you were talking to an employer that just runs a grad scheme at the moment and was thinking about apprenticeship, what would you say to them? What's the pros, reason to do it? Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the main things is talking about the levy, with the growth and skills levy, as it's now called, is if you've got money that you're already being taxed on to use towards apprenticeships, why not use it? 0.5% of your levy, of your payroll is going towards a levy pot if you earn over 3 million in terms of employee payroll. So that's really important. That's an absolute no-brainer. But if you're kind of on the fence and you're a non-levy payer, then it's looking at what are the benefits, what are your issues that you're seeing in recruitment? Are you getting what you need from your grad schemes? Can you diversify? I mean, diversification of thought, getting different types of people in your business is a key kind of growth area for any business, really. So why not try it with 1 or 2, see what you think? Me stating all the benefits is not usually going to sway many people. Try it and before you buy it and have a go, see what happens.
And what do you think young people are looking for? Basically from that, I guess, coming out of school leavers in that way. What are they after?
Yeah, I was reading a survey. I think it was by Deloitte, and it was talking about Gen Z and kind of later millennials and what they're looking for in life, and it's been a huge shift. And we can talk about COVID and perhaps things earlier than that as well, that have made a huge change in that. And one of them being work-life balance. It seems strange to think before 2019, a lot of us didn't work from home. It wasn't really a thing. And now it's kind of sometimes an absolute liberty if you're not able to work from home 3 days a week. And I've spoken to some young people, that's one of their key questions when they're talking to me about roles. Luckily we're able to support that, but not every company does. So work-life balance, flexibility. I think a lot of people want to be able to live their life first and have work mold around that, which is absolutely fine, and that's the way we're going. But secondly is culture and values. I think that the study said around 30% of young people prioritise their cultures and values and have to be aligned with that company. Yeah. Whereas I don't think it used to be that case in kind of older generations. So things like sustainability, kind of what they're doing around eco and green tech. So it's lots of interesting things around that.
You're absolutely right. I don't think it did exist. I don't think when I went into the workforce, those were, showing my age a little bit now. I'm just 50 this year. So, but you kind of, when I thought about joining an organisation, how green an organisation was and things like that, that just wasn't there. Yeah. It wasn't here. You're right about working 5 days a week in the office. Obviously an office worker at the time, but that was just the norm. That wasn't something I'd even considered.
Well, I don't think I ever looked at a company's values or mission statement prior to a job. It was usually the salary and whether or not I could do the qualifications.
Yeah. Too. Do you think when a young person's coming out, they have a different attitude towards apprenticeship to then kind of the grad scheme that they may do? Is there something going on there in terms of, we talked about, a little bit about you and I in terms of where we might have been better. I definitely think I would have been better in an apprenticeship scheme personally myself. But do you think they have a different outlook in terms of what their expectations are?
It's a good question. I wonder if that's one for them directly in kind of looking at what their thoughts are. In terms of what you see is, what you can imagine you see is coming out of a 5-year degree apprenticeship, having done all of that work-based learning alongside actually completing your degree. I imagine that makes you feel more empowered to go out and deliver as a senior colleague. I remember when I came out of a university graduate program, entering the workplace, albeit I did it in a different industry to what my degree was in. I was incredibly nervous. I don't think I had those professional skills that people would have developed being in the workplace. Writing emails, it seems really simple, but that's a difficult thing to do when you haven't done it. Writing emails, speaking publicly. I went into a sales organisation, and one of the things we used to do is do stand-up hours. And that puts hairs on your chest. So it's a completely different realm. You have that theoretical knowledge, but you don't necessarily have some of those professional skills, and that's hard to get.
Yeah, sure. Do you think there's anything in schemes that actually puts young people off an apprenticeship or doing an apprenticeship?
Oh yeah, perhaps it is daunting. I mean, at 18, I've always said that I would have loved to do an apprenticeship. Now, would I have been ready to enter the workplace at 18? I was still quite immature. I was still, excited to go off to university and kind of go to all the nights out and that kind of thing. Yeah. Would I have been ready? That's a really good question. And that's a question I asked to young people that are toying between the two. Are you ready to go into the workplace? Is that something you want to do? Because it is quite intimidating. It is quite a lot. It's not as, and I'm not calling graduate programs easy, but you do have fewer professional responsibilities. So you have to really search your soul for those answers, I think, and see if you're ready for that workplace.
Yeah. And do you think when your experiences at BAE, when a young person's looking at the role, or even within the role, the job content is more important to them than, say, the qualifications and career progression?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen a few kind of really interesting reports around, it's particularly around kind of females looking at roles, is the job content from even the job title. It's really important to them. It has to align to their cultures and values. And there are coded language. It's a really good look into kind of the psychology of language and what it does to someone who's looking to apply to a role. So there are plenty of things that would put people off. And that's something you have to kind of look into that exact study, but it's really interesting. And then we come down to the job description. There are lots of ways that you can put off young people. So it's about aligning to their cultures and values. It's about offering them the most support, particularly around things like mental health and well-being. It's a completely different concept writing a job description for a young person than it is for a more experienced hire, I think.
And I think you get a mixture, don't you? So in apprenticeship, you've got school leavers, you've even got college leavers. Maybe a little bit more advanced or taking a view. You also do have older apprenticeships or people looking at that. Do you think there's a difference in terms of their priorities, or they just sort of stay the same?
Yeah, I think apprenticeships really are just offering people a completely different format, and they're growing year on year, as we've said before. It's offering people the opportunity to retrain So you do often find those that are slightly older getting into apprenticeships because it's a great opportunity to retrain whilst being paid. Not everyone can afford to go back to university or to do an evening class. So this is a fantastic opportunity for people to be on the job, earning and learning, and perhaps entering a different career. Back in my days working for a college, I saw, I visited the plumbing class once, and there was a former taxi driver in his 50s, and he'd kind of gone through the lockdown period, and there was fewer taxi needs, so he'd just retrained, and that's the empowerment that you get through an apprenticeship, I think.
Yeah. My father's a London taxi driver, so but he's actually 78, so he's stayed in the. He's still out there now, still out there driving,
fantastic. Which
is But it was a tough period. It was a tough period during COVID. You know, you couldn't work. It was one of the areas. You know, people weren't moving around central London and things like that.
Yeah,
so
I mean, significantly less so from where I'm from, because we're a bit more countryside, less taxis.
Is there skills or areas that an apprenticeship struggles with, do you think, at all? Is there things to watch out for?
Well, this is, we have to be more understanding of apprentices, particularly school leavers. Those that go through graduate programs have a bit more time to mature. Those that are coming straight from school are raw into the workplace. They don't know certain things, and they haven't experienced the workplace, with work experience and things like that. So I think we have to give them a bit more leeway, but a lot more support. So like I said earlier, it's things like writing an email. We as people in the business, we've been doing it for years. We think it's easy, but it's not particularly that easy for people that haven't had experience. I'm seeing a lot of issues with kind of public speaking, confidence issues.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the main kind of responses you'd get if you asked a school of children, what are your key skills you think you could develop? It would be confidence, public speaking. And within the workplace, that develops very quickly, because you get to network with lots of people. You get opportunities as an apprentice to speak in front of senior members of the team, and with your fellow peers, in large organisations at least anyway. So I think that's one of the key ones coming from school is that confidence in public speaking, for sure.
Yeah, I think my sister's headmistress, primary school headmistress, but she would talk quite a lot about the differences pre-COVID to after COVID, not around kind of children's behaviour, but also about parents' behaviour as well, to a certain extent, and the way in which they would interact and speak regarding that. And I think that's a key part. It's good you sort of pull upon that, touch about that kind of public speaking. There's quite a few things, we locked people down for quite a period of time. Yeah. It was a really difficult space to be in, and I think there's certain skills that you lost, ultimately. With
the so if you might not have heard them before, but the Careers and Enterprise Company have careers hubs, and they go into schools and work with the careers leaders to ensure that they're meeting Gatsby benchmarks, which is all about their careers guidance. And as part of that, they asked all the students in secondary schools to do what's called a future skills questionnaire, which talks about, or asks them loads of questions around their careers readiness, essentially. And the number one thing we're seeing a lot at the moment is their work readiness being quite lowly scored. So, as people doing outreach, we need to be working on that. And work readiness is everything from that confidence that we spoke about, being ready to step into a work environment. How are you going to feel being there? And that's not just COVID or the pandemic. That is everything before that. It's always been a tough one. Because we focus on things like careers fairs, we need to be focusing on things that really develop their work readiness and confidence.
And what do you think an employer needs to do in terms of the support structure that they need to put around that? You talked about support earlier, and the thoughts around that.
I think it's the talent pipeline is we expect them to come and apply to our roles. It doesn't always work like that. Some companies are more blessed than others, for sure. But it's certainly, if you're in a niche industry, you need to be going out there and kind of exploring what your industry does with young people and explaining what it does, giving them the work readiness within your career, within your industry. And doing that is by going in and hosting kind of meaningful work experiences, hosting little projects, giving them some work to do that's relevant to your industry. That is the support structures that are going to enable these young people to apply to your roles, but actually be ready for your industry, I think.
At Amberjack, one of the areas we focus on is learning development, basically after placement, but also learning and development through the recruitment process. So, asking an apprentice or asking a school leaver who's applying for an apprenticeship, they're suddenly not going to have any skills in terms of being able to do a video, an online video screen around it. They've never probably done it before. They're whilst they're tech enabled and kids amaze me. My kids amaze me in terms of their knowledge of what they use. But I've lived through it. They don't know, suddenly how to do a video screen or go through those processes, which we typically, have an expectation that they will do. We at Amberjack, we provide obviously training through the different stages to teach them that, and obviously then post placement is also support providing that. But I think it's important that employees sort of recognise the actual support that's required.
Yeah, I find that so useful what you're doing, because we seem to expect them to come with these skills just because they're the tech generation, but actually they're not. But I do find they're incredibly adaptable, and when we empower them to learn those skills, they do it very quickly and often excel the people that have been in the business and industry for years.
When the design of the program and what you put in place, so even at BAE, around the individual and the different skill sets that they're going down, do you get input and feedback basically from a two-way side in terms of the people that have been successful and followed through in terms of how you can improve and do different
I
schemes?
think so. So I'm not on that side of things, but in terms of our outreach and what we're doing in terms of meeting young people as and what the careers hubs do, it's data so important. Taking on what looking at these future skills questionnaires, for example, to develop that outreach strategy, to develop what's useful. You absolutely need to be taking on data and feedback.
Yeah, and who do you see that's doing this well? You look, I guess, around. You sort of hear things. I go to conferences. Obviously, I try and sort of soak up as much as I possibly can from other employees. One of our clients, Virgin Media, doing exceptionally well, around it, winning awards, etc. Around it. But any places you see that has been successful? I
mean, there are individuals, aren't there, that I've seen. There is something called the GCSE Boost, which I've seen happening out in Bristol, which I think is Junior Saunders who runs that. That seems to be a fantastic outreach that's happening and empowering young people to get involved with careers. And then looking on the social media aspect, there are people out there that are developing fantastic programs around awareness and exposure and developing those skills linked to companies. So there are plenty of people out there, but individuals I can't think of any at the minute.
No, that's okay. And sort of thinking about, we talked a little bit just about the reasons why young people are kind of thinking about actually joining an organisation. But how important do you think actually company culture and beliefs is?
Yeah, I think absolutely. As I said earlier, over a third are looking at cultures and values and ethics as their number one priority for joining a business. And it isn't just sustainability and green and eco. It's, as I said, work-life balance, but looking at, what's their job going to be like whilst they're there? Are they going to be supported? Things like buddy schemes or mentorship programs, vitally important because they want to be developed. They're very driven now, young people especially. I mean, even I'd say, myself, driven to succeed and go up the business. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. And what do you think, the way in which they join the organisation, but how do you kind of make them feel valued and engaged? How does that work?
Well, I think there's been a change recently, hasn't there? With you talk to your parents' generation, and they used to stay in businesses for 30 years, whereas nowadays, certainly in my old industry, which was sales, people tend to move every 2 years to find better salaries or promotions or new locations with better work from home policies or whatever it might be. But I think it's all of those extras, isn't it, that we need to be, as businesses, offering. There's a social side of it too. For now, we're not going to university. If we're doing an apprenticeship, they're missing out on that social aspect that they get at university, which is crucially important. For larger organisations with huge cohorts of apprentices, it's easier. But how do you do that as a small business? Enable them to have social networks. So it's perhaps linking with other small businesses and have your apprentices pull together. Because not only do they have that social aspect, but they also talk about their jobs and then grow each other, which is fantastic.
Is there any sort of watch outs that you think are important? If it's, particularly if you're kind of about to sort of set up a new apprenticeship scheme, maybe you've just done graduate schemes in the past.
Yeah, I think it can't be half done. It has to be done with your full body, I guess. It's incredibly complex. I mean, that's the only thing I do say to small businesses when I talk to them and try and get them into apprenticeships. I appreciate that, we always say it's a no-brainer and you have to be doing it, but it is very difficult. And a lot of small businesses only have a couple of people in HR perhaps, and it will be a part of their job as opposed to having a full-time early careers manager. So it's investing in the infrastructure. So that is the people that are there to look after them in the workplace, both making sure they're progressing along their route of their apprenticeship qualification, but also keeping an eye on their well-being. Making sure your line managers have got the adequate training to look after someone who's not an experienced hire, who's a young person straight out of school. It's a completely different concept. So there are lots of things that you need to look out for, I think, in terms of how it's so different. You can't just copy and paste your processes from your senior project manager down to your apprentice business administrator.
I was going to talk about line managers because I think that's really important in terms of, because the education that you need to give them is vast, I guess, ultimately. It's
a hard landscape. I mean, it's completely different, and that's the main thing. It is completely different. It doesn't mean it's hard in terms of harder than line managing someone else. It's just something that you need to take some thought of. How you approach one-to-ones, how you approach making sure they're happy in their environment, because they won't be the same as you or I. So they need a little bit of a different touch in terms of making sure they're happy in their role and progressing along their apprenticeship.
Yeah, agree. I think it's so. I mean, I remember being a younger manager myself, but also kind of as I've kind of moved through my career, being moving through different roles and being a manager, in the way in which you're supporting the training that an organisation ultimately needs to give you, I think is hugely important. That's kind of where HR come in to play regarding it. So I just don't think you can take that part lightly at all.
No, training is vital in that aspect, isn't it?
Can never get through a podcast without really talking about AI in any ways. Just interested in your sort of perspective of what you see, I guess, is changing or things that your thoughts are regarding it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we're seeing, back in my college days, I saw a lot of kind of curriculum leaders would use AI to create the curriculum for the term. It's got fantastic uses.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about apprenticeships, and we see a lot of issues now around kind of redundancies and AI coming in, swooping in to take everyone's jobs. But I think that's a bit of a dramatisation of what's actually happening. I think AI is obviously here to stay. It's very much like the .com boom when the internet became really, really, really kind of huge and massive. But it's not going to eradicate a lot of people's jobs. It may do some, but it's those that then end up using it properly, training themselves in how to be efficient with AI, that are going to be the leaders of the next generation. And I think young people coming into apprenticeships, they're tech enabled and they're knowing how to use this. They're coming out of school using it. So us people that have been in the industry, we need to get up to scrapes with it.
Well, we do, and I think organisations generally, are behind ultimately in the way in which they're training their own employees around the best use of AI. I agree completely. The roles that we'll see, we'll lose some junior roles, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to lose grad roles or apprenticeship roles. In fact, the junior roles we're going to lose is, it happens now already. You got to put your own shopping through the supermarket. It doesn't matter if you like it or hate it. I hate it personally because I always do it wrong, and I'm forever getting the weighing thing wrong, or doing different things around it. But that's it. But like receptionists, you'd often typically check in yourself now around it. Contact centre, that's going to be done more by chatbots. Ultimately, I do that even myself now when I'm kind of querying things. I find it a lot more convenient, a lot more easier to do, and there's certain those roles. But there's so many roles which are going to create more of a certainly a creative generalist kind of type role, because that's what AI doesn't actually have. It doesn't have that real creativity and everything that individuals or we as human beings ultimately can kind of provide. But sitting alongside you, it can work seamlessly well.
I think it's that reduction in operators, isn't it? And in terms of safety and all that kind of stuff, we talk about machines on a manufacturing floor plate. We saw it when they started inventing those massive arms that then create car parts. That reduced jobs, but actually those jobs still maintained because those machines need to be maintained, operated, and looked after. So it just shifts, and we're going to see that for the next million years, and jobs will just shift around as we invent new technologies.
They do, and I think even so again, Amberjack, it's my business. I'm looking at the number of applications we're seeing at the top of the funnel. I mean, it's significantly increasing. Why is that increasing? Is there a slight reduction in jobs? A little bit, but not significantly enough to say that's the reason why applications are so. We're seeing such a high number come through. So you've got to look through that process and say, if people are finding it more easier to apply and get information regarding an organisation and getting that information very quickly to say, yes, I do want to apply, so you're increasing that number of applications. You need to equally, within the kind of processes, actually manage that accordingly with some further tech. And we did a podcast just recently of the way in which certain clients are introducing AI or machines to basically help us through the screening process, help us through the video screening. But around that, what we're having to do is put a huge amount of control basically around it, and that's kind of creating a world of quality assurance effectively for us. And whilst we always had it, it's increasing kind of our numbers.
I think that's one of the number one skills we need to be gaining, is actually being able to verify AI. I've seen so many videos that I've later turned out, and I've told my mates about it, and it turns out actually that was a fake video. But it's the same with applications that you're probably seeing with Amberjack and things, is that it used to be that we got our parents to do our applications for jobs, but actually now they're using AI. But there are some key signifiers where you can tell. But I'm not necessarily against it, to be honest. If you're inputting the right information about your experiences and you're using it to enable you to be better, then for sure, this is fantastic.
I was speaking to someone the other day, and they were talking, and we were talking about AI in the kind of recruitment process and things like that. And someone came up and they said, look, what if you get a candidate and they create an avatar of themselves that basically does the screening, so it's not really them, and they click through and they've got the right answers to all of the questions, etc., and they design that. What do you do in that case? And our response back was hire them. If they're that intelligent, if they know how to do that kind of stuff, clever. That's the person that we want around it. And I think that's the way in which you actually have to embrace it ultimately.
Because it's not easy to use AI in the best way. I mean, it's easy to use it, but it's not easy to use it good, I think, is the key delineator. People that are really handling it effectively are absolutely going to be the best candidates.
And shameless plug again, I guess, for me, for Amberjack, we've been working on a product which basically tests the candidate's use of AI in assessment. So rather than that kind of protectionist and saying, protecting against making sure the candidate's not using AI, we actually test their use of it. So we've created our own language model, also like a ChatGPT within the assessment product, which is basically we create a case study for like a financial management query or something like that, and then we ask the applying candidate to basically go through different scenarios, question them, but get them to use the product to basically good. See how they can work and watch not really what the end response is from, say, the ChatGPT, but it's actually fact the prompts, what they're asking it.
Because we'll all become users at some point. Absolutely. It's how you use it. Absolutely, that's great.
It's gonna sit alongside you. So, looking a little bit ahead, how do you think things will evolve a little bit from the apprenticeship over the coming years? Things that may happen.
It's a big question. I mean, who knows for sure? But I think we'll see digital and tech roles are going to take up the majority of apprenticeships and just jobs in general. I think. Again, as you've probably found from this, I love stats and surveys. So I think it's about a third of all jobs are going to be within the digital and tech arenas. So I think you'll see a growth in digital and tech apprenticeships. Ones with AI within the curriculum is always the way it's going to go. I see more and more training providers doing that as their kind of added value, which is fantastic. But there are things that are going to maintain. So kind of engineering, rail infrastructure is going to continue to grow. And then green tech careers. So, some of the government promises around heat pumps are quite phenomenal, but
they are.
That's where careers are going to go and maintain, and that's how I see it. Certainly apprenticeships are going to fall behind because all of those jobs are where apprenticeships will be fantastically valuable.
I don't like to get too much into politics on discussions, but do you think there's things that the governments, whichever government it is that's governing, that need to think about in terms of encouragement around schemes?
I think they've been really good recently, and it takes a lot. I think apprenticeships has been a hard area for both sides of the government, or Conservative and Labour, to really manage, because it's a growing demand. Lots of people have opinions, and one thing that I think's been done really well recently is that they did try and cut level 7 apprenticeships from the levy, which saw public outcry and frustration, and they've taken that on board and looked back at their decision and thought, okay, how can we meet in the middle? And they've made a bit of a kind of a sacrifice. They've met in the middle with what we were saying, so I think that's great. They're making lots of decisions, lots of big decisions, the incoming government. So it's nice to see that we're listening to what people are saying once they've made those decisions, and not necessarily double downing on them. So it's been fantastic to see. I suppose what they're trying to at the moment is focus on the youth guarantee, which is getting more young people into careers and kind of reducing that number of NEETs. Whereas beforehand we were kind of focusing a bit in the middle. There was a lot around the levy, which enabled employers to use that on middle managers and going through kind of master's degree level apprenticeships, which is what they were trying to do by reducing those level 7s. But you have things like solicitor apprenticeships, which is the majority is kind of 20, 21, 25. So they were kind of being part of the problem, but they weren't they were still part of that youth guarantee, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think they've done lots of good, lots of change. I think it's never easy for anyone to do, is it?
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I meant to say at the beginning, and we should have said, you've got your own podcast, Tom.
Yes,
So
it's not as fancy as this,
well,
but it's lovely.
Well, I don't know. It's a good logo and things like that up there. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about it. What's it about?
So it's the reason I kind of invented it is that I have a kind of side business called Find a Training Provider, which is about empowering employers to find the right provider, because we need to improve upon what's currently out there. And as a practitioner within early careers, I found that I'm not getting the development that I need. So we have lots of change within industry at the moment, from assessment reforms within apprenticeships. T-levels is a huge thing that there's been kind of lots of debate around. And I don't like reading. I just can't stand reading books, reading the government papers, which are huge, 70 odd pages long. I'd rather
hold a lot of information for not reading books. I'll just put that there.
Well, that's it. And so I'm kind of trying and take everything in the audio format. It's not something that I hate reading. It's more that I can't read that well. It just doesn't go in. I get distracted. So yeah, audio format. I listen to a lot of podcasts, which and what I found, there wasn't a lot of development for people like me. So we get on guests essentially. It's all in audio format, no lighting, and we get on guests that just want to break it down into a more easier to digest format. So we've had T-levels. Work experience was a big one, and it's been a really good 6 episodes, and we're going to do some more next year, I think. Good,
excellent. So thinking about this, we talked about a lot of information, but what advice would you give to an employer that's actually thinking about setting themselves up an apprenticeship scheme?
There are a lot of support mechanisms out there, and that's possibly the scariest thing. So I used to work for a college, and we used to support small local businesses into apprenticeships, and the number one hesitation was, I'm not ready, or I don't have the capacity or the time to do that. But there are a huge amount of companies out there, or organisations that will support. So you have consultancies that will support your early careers, as you know, but also government-based organisations. So careers hubs. If you Google your local county and careers hub, you'll find them. They're from the Careers and Enterprise Company. Lots of volunteers, of which I'm one of them. You have kind of apprenticeships and skills hubs too that are based within the council. And lots of organisations like this will provide you with the resources, the know-how, the ability to go out and recruit. At the local college I worked for, we helped businesses recruit, so we did all the Indeed business. Not as fancy as some recruitment companies, but we supported our community. So I would just go out there and find out, ask questions of your local colleges, providers and governments, councils. see what resources are out there, and you may even stumble across some incentives for taking on apprentices. There are some there too.
And your thoughts of how you've seen success, I guess around from a diverse workforce, it's been really super helpful,
Yes.
ultimately to hit those goals.
Yeah, for sure. I think where I've seen success is those that embrace it, and where I've seen failure is those that kind of look at it selfishly, for want of a better word. Look at the cost and the time issues that this is going to cause. So in short term, it will be costly, both in your time and your finances, to set up programs. But if you take on all that support and you get it up and running, you're going to see huge amounts of long-term benefit. So it is that long-term benefit over short-term hassle, I suppose, that you need to look over. So where I've seen success is that embracing it, being really kind of self-sacrificing into the industry, and understanding that your apprentice may not stay with you for the duration or after your apprenticeship, but they will go into your industry, and you'll have other companies that will do the same back to you.
And what advice would you give to an apprentice that's kind of thinking about getting into a scheme?
I think, and we've talked about values and ethics, one of the number one things you'll see as an early careers interview is behaviours and values. Is really important. We're not expecting, or no company at this stage is expecting these young people to have 6 years experience with Python coding or whatever it might be, and they probably have it anyway, but no one's expecting these kind of humongous amounts of experience in life or in work. So what we're looking for is people to represent behaviours and values of the company, and this goes for any company, I would say, that are recruiting from an early careers or a young people perspective. So just Google them. They're always on the websites. Go and find out examples of when you've been good and when you've been not so good at each behaviour and value, and that should set you off to a really good start.
Yeah, that's good. That was going to kind of be one of my final questions, but I always like to finish the podcast with kind of a quick fire round around it too, because it's always great to get your thoughts. So we'll do some of these quick fire questions for you, Tom. So you ready?
Yeah.
So apprenticeships in one word.
Wow. Okay, that
could be the word. Wow.
No.
That could be the one.
I wasn't expecting it. That apprenticeships in one word. Future. There we go.
Perfect. One thing employers overcomplicate. You can use a couple of words. You don't need to use one word.
One thing's that employers overcomplicate. Process.
Yeah, good. The biggest myth about apprentices.
The biggest myth about apprenticeships, I think, is that some of these professional jobs. So I'll stick to more than one word. The biggest myth I'd say is that you don't have to just be a carpenter or a plumber or a hairdresser. You can be all sorts of things. There are about 700 odd apprenticeships.
Best advice you were ever given early in your career?
Best advice would probably be to just get out there and do it. Get out of your comfort zone, put your hand up, take part in things.
One change you'd love to see in early careers, could be across anything.
I would like to see more support for smaller and medium businesses, I think, and perhaps incentives to take apprentices on.
One skill every young person should build?
Confidence.
Good. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Good one.
Times 5.
One final one. One message you give to every apprentice listening.
Try and show yourself to an employer, or try and bring out everything that you do from your home life, personal life, and kind of maybe work experience. Just try and be yourself. And if you don't get the role being yourself, then it wasn't your role.
Good. Well, listen, Tom, it's been great talking to you today. I appreciate everybody listening. As Tom mentioned, he has his own podcast, so please go and watch out for that and follow that and listen to that. But I appreciate everyone listening today. It's been an insightful conversation. I look forward to future ones with you in the future. So thanks, Tom.
Thanks so much for having me.